What do you guys consider the Nintendo Switch? 8th gen with PS4 and Xbox One, or 9th gen with PS5 and Xbox One, Xbox Series X? There's been a lot of debate about what is considered, and Wikipedia is not the deciding factor, and power is not the deciding factor. And Riku wants me to read his answer after we've answered this. Chris, I'm going to go with you first. What is the Switch? What do you consider? What generation does it belong to?
Well, it's not a refresh, so
Actually, you know
it
what,
can't be.
Chris, I'm sorry. Let's back it off a little bit. What do we consider a generation? What is our criteria for what makes it, a generation of a video game? I think we should
But
establish that first, and then we go on. What do you
I
consider it?
I would consider it a unique platform that has run I'd say a standard course of 5 to 7 years, right? So, um, like what I mean by a unique system, usually in the old days, like one system couldn't play the games of another, so it went from Master System to Genesis or NES to Super NES, right? You had a unique format. It was cartridge based, but it was unique, and and then the generation lasted a certain lifespan. So, going from like Sega Saturn to Dreamcast, right? This format, but they're totally different. They're not comparable. They were unique experiences, and so with what he's asking with the Wii U was situation in the eighth generation. Regardless if it failed or not, it still was in that generation. So and how like the Wii U was out what 6 years for the Switch
Yeah,
launched.
something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, so that whether or not it did well or not, it still counts as a generation of system. The Switch is completely different hardware. It's more advanced, and it's a departure from what preceded it, right? So it cannot be another eighth generation system. So I 100% agree with what he's saying. Like the Switch has a unique format. It cannot play Wii U disc. It has its own cartridges. It went from disc to cartridge base. It's all the features like you can undock it, take it with you, detach the Joy Cons, all this stuff the stuff the Wii U couldn't do, probably stuff that Nintendo wanted it to do but couldn't do it at the time. So I think it's like the idea of the Wii U was finally realized in the Switch. But with that said, it's not the same thing. So the Switch would count as in my opinion, as a new generation, even though Nintendo launched it outside of usually when the big three launch all their stuff. It's usually lined up in the same year, around the same year, and they decided to launch it outside of that window of time. But it doesn't matter. I agree with him that it counts as for Nintendo. It counts as their ninth generation.
yeah, yeah. For Nintendo, it definitely does. Here's the thing, and I could, you let me know if I'm wrong in this kind of thinking. I kind of base generations off of power, right? That's kind of because it kind of in the beginning it wasn't like that with gaming, but it eventually kind of did. Like even though this, like the 16-bit era, that's based on power, 32-bit power, 120-bit power, right? So I kind of
Mm-hmm.
always base it on power, right? So with that in mind, I consider this may be controversial. I consider the Switch a seventh generation console because it's comparable to the PS3 and Xbox 360. It is not comparable to
You
PS4.
you did it by power.
Huh?
Here's the thing
So
though.
that's my again. I could be wrong, but that's just how I base it. So, Riku, it's not to me. It's neither the eighth or ninth generation. It is a seventh gen system. Albeit a very powerful seventh gen system, but it's still a seventh generation system because it's comparable to PS3. It's peers, I should say, for lack of a better term. It's peers of the PlayStation 3 and 360 in terms of power. The PS4 and Xbox One outstrip it in every sense of
Well,
the fashion.
the fact that it's just porting over games from that previous generation
Yeah,
is proof.
exactly.
That's it. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
and I would say the Wii U is also a seventh gen system. So yeah, that's my answer. Go ahead, Brett.
Um, are you aware that the 3DS is an eighth generation console?
That's stupid.
That's what it's regarded
All right,
as.
bro.
Wait,
That's too much. You've been drinking.
I just looked it up, man.
Yeah,
Tony, just edit that part out when we do the post.
Yeah.
So let's
We're just-
I don't. Yeah, I
All
think
right,
I think we're gonna leave handhelds don't count in this conversation. We're talking
No,
about
the handheld should get, because this, in my opinion, is the predecessor, or is the continuation of the 3DS line.
Well, we're not
It's
going to
Brett,
get into that. We're not
Brett,
going to get into that
wait,
argument.
uh,
We're not going to get into that argument.
Consoles and handhelds have not coincided when it comes to generation. Nowhere.
Yeah, I know. They artificially call the 3DS 8th generation to put it in stack time-wise with the rest of the consoles.
I'm not even entertaining that, bro. That shit is not a fucking generation, man. That's not a console.
Well,
It's not even a
but
console. It's not a console.
That's what I'm arguing, man.
Yeah. Okay. Just
It's a handheld. It's not a console.
Yeah.
Judge it by handheld standard.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
like
Yeah.
I agree.
and
It
what's
is
weird?
It is the generation after the 3DS. So
What-
judge it by its
Oh,
standards.
Switch. Oh, yeah. Again,
Yeah.
you know my stance on Switch. I don't consider that a true handheld.
That it's not a
What's
console.
weird? What's
It is a
weird is
console. Yeah.
on Wikipedia they count the Wii U and the Switch as both being 8th generation, which I can't agree with that. They're two totally different systems, right?
Yeah,
And they're looking at it in a window of time. They're saying the 8th generation is 2011 to the present. But I disagree with that because just because the systems are so fundamentally different that that they can't both count as 8th generation.
I mean,
And I get where Tony's coming from because the Wii U was barely 7th generation.
Yeah, barely.
And then this one, more realized, is comparable to that, you know,
Well,
but not up to where 8th
either-
generation's power is.
either it has to go by time or it has to go individually, and I think it should be individually. Sony's 8th generation of consoles, kind of thing, and that number should be different than Microsoft. Sony has had one more console than Microsoft. Like, that's just the way that we should be talking about it if we're trying to use language appropriately.
I do, and this is why I asked the question: how do we define a generation? Because it seems even from our talk right now, it seems there's
Individually.
Again, let me just break it down. There's 3 different metrics that seem to be going on, right? The one metric is time, right? This came out during this time window. That's a generation. That's one metric. The other metric, the one I'm using, power. It has this kind of power. That's one metric. And then the other metric is individual, like you said, like even Chris said. This is Nintendo's 9th generation, but this would be Microsoft's 4th generation. So there's 3 metrics. So, and I don't know if we're going to be able to agree on
2 of them are misleading.
Which ones are misleading.
The ones that aren't individual.
Yeah, but the thing is,
You can't say this is a Microsoft Generation 8 console and then be like, oh, so there were 7 more before that? No, there were 3 more before that.
no. But
That's
no.
stupid.
Brett, I see what you're saying, but it's all about the phrasing. It's not Microsoft's 8th generation console. It's the console that Microsoft launched during the 8th generation. Understand?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Microsoft's Gen 8 console.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Like, you could say Microsoft. It's not Microsoft's 8th generation console.
Yes.
It's Microsoft's Generation 8 console,
Mm-hmm.
which is fucking a stupid way to use language. It's going out of your way to use language wrong, and it infuriates me.
Yeah, but that's,
It intentionally obfuscates. It's a bad metric. I mean, it may be the standard metric, and if it is, it's still a bad metric, because when you explain something to somebody, if it's a good explanation, they won't have to have you explain it to them again in at least 1 or 2 more ways before you understand what the fuck they're talking about. The only one on that list where you're like, yeah, that makes sense, is to say this is Microsoft's 4th generation of consoles. There is no way to misinterpret that. That is easy.
yeah, but
If you say this is Microsoft's Gen 8 console, that is a confusing word game.
No, but here's the thing, though. If you talk, and we're talking about gamers right now, we're not talking about the general public. If you go to a gamer and go, hey, 8th generation, they're gonna instantly know what you're talking about, right? But if you go, this is Microsoft's 4th generation, they're gonna be
I
like,
don't
what the
think
fuck are
most
you
people
talking
will
about?
instantly know what you're talking
Yes,
about.
no, most gamers, not most people, most gamers know. You know, that's what I'm
You
saying
think
here.
so?
Yeah, of course. That's dude. We all use the same language here. We all remember community.
I had to look that shit up.
Dude, okay, well, you did. I did it. I know about that for like 20 years now. You know that's how it's just been delineated. And, we talked about. And remember, we talked about communities, right? What do communities do? They have language they agree on. There's something we agree on. You know, this is this generation. This is this generation. This is this generation. You know.
All right, okay. Well, then here's my proposal. You should look at it like a timeline, right? So when competing consoles release around the same time, that's essentially the start of a new generation.
Yeah, that's one metric. Yeah.
And then when Nintendo comes up and fucks up the timeline, they're just late to that generation. They're not starting a new one. They're just late to the old one.
Well, that's the thing I also want to talk about. Nintendo fucked up everything.
Can we have a
yeah, go ahead, bro.
Can we at least have a survey of who believes that the Switch is part of the 8th generation?
We could do that.
In what sense? Just like in every encompassing measure? Like if I'm counting it as a handheld?
Just in your opinion, and whatever criteria
you have, yeah.
Because for like, and the 8th generation is Xbox One, PS4, right?
Yeah.
And I do include that. I do include the Switch.
Oh, but the Wii U is included in 8th generation.
They're both there for me, at least.
But you can't have two systems from the same company in the same generation.
Well, what about the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X? Like it's like those were even bigger leaps, hardware wise.
No, they weren't big leaps.
No, they were just.
They were not big leaps. They were just system refreshes.
Remember, Sony still considers the PS4 Pro a PS4. They don't consider.
No, it is. I'm just saying, hardware wise, they're big. They're bigger leaps in hardware performance than the Wii U was with Switch.
No,
the Switch is completely different internally than the Wii U.
It's a different machine. Yeah, the PS4 and PS4 Pro are still the same thing.
No, I'm saying it's way more powerful.
It's not way more powerful.
No.
It's not about power though. Like we've established that it's not about.
I'm still going with power. That's my metric.
But they're both released at the same generation. Like regardless of whether, because the Switch didn't really. It's not going to be part of the PS5, Xbox.
And this is why we need to judge them individually.
Series X.
Fucked it up. Nintendo fucked everything up by releasing 2 consoles before either console had a chance. Like they had 2 in that same time frame. Technically, if you want to look at it, it's 2 in the same generation, but they are different gen consoles. You're both technically right.
Nintendo fucked everything up.
They broke the generation cycle.
They broke the time space.
So like we can't have a clear answer because Nintendo. Like before this, if Nintendo weren't in the mix, everybody would have a consensus of roughly when a new generation starts. And so then saying 8th generation would make sense because they're jumping. It is not Microsoft's 8th generation of consoles. It's their representation of the 8th generation of consoles.
Yes.
It's the 8th time new console series has come out, and they've jumped on board on Gen 4. That would make sense. Nintendo came in and fucked up the whole thing, though.
No, I agree.
You can't judge it by blocks like that.
Yeah. And I guess I see where you guys are coming from because not only and this is probably at this point hasn't been raised yet. It released 2017. The Switch did, which is 3 years before the start of the new generation, quote unquote, where the new Xbox and PS5 are going to come out, and the Switch will probably last 3 more years at the very least.
Yeah.
So it not only will be knee deep into the last gen, it'll be knee deep into the next gen. And I guess that's where the whole rumor is with the Switch Pro. So
Carlos, I think you just argued against.
Yeah, I am. I think.
Well, no, because the way that you just said it in casual passing, without realizing, I think you just said that both Nintendos exist in this generation.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
No, but he said that before too.
He did. I know. But there's not really another way. If we're talking about in this generation, like he is right. And in casual conversation,
I found the key.
Yeah,
Brett, this all resides on you because I understand where everyone else is going to come from, and they'll jump into my cause. Brett, you're the only one that I don't know I can trust to jump in my cause.
I was here.
If we say that the Switch is a handheld console, it solves everything.
I'm not going to say that.
I agree.
I'm not gonna say it's shit's a handheld.
No, that was the point I was making earlier. If you call Switch, or if you call the 3DS, the Switch the successor to the 3DS, it counts as 9th gen.
Because if we
It's a handheld.
If
I don't
we
consider it a
if we call the
Microsoft sees
Switch a
them
Damn
as
it, Tony!
handheld,
Do you realize what you're
the
doing?
formula only
I'm
makes
keeping it
sense
real,
if the
son.
Switch is a handheld.
Yeah, well, I'm not calling it a handheld. Even
If
Nintendo
you
doesn't.
call it a handheld, it all
Nintendo
makes
doesn't
sense.
even call it a
They don't have to
handheld.
call it, but it looks like crap when you plug it in.
You know?
When it's docked.
Well, that's the
compared
only
to,
that's the only way I
PS4.
play,
It's a
baby.
handheld you can dock.
You've been playing the
Vita
wrong.
did the same
Nintendo
thing
calls it a
with the hand-
console, bro. Come on.
Of course, because they're trying to get the gimmick working, but you know what? It's whack. It's a handheld.
Dude,
And you're talking to a guy who loves it
you
and
could
plays.
plug
I play
the
my Switch
Vita.
more than anything else.
You can plug the Vita into the TV.
No, you can't.
And do
You
the
can't
same
plug your
thing.
Vita into the TV.
You can't plug the Vita into the TV,
How?
bro.
Well, you can do the remote play.
No.
That's from PS4 to the Vita.
Yeah.
To the
Not the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
way. Not the other way around.
He's
Yeah, I
thinking
guess
of
that makes it
PlayStation
more
TV,
peripheral, though.
where you would take the memory card out and you could put that in. To the,
I just want to let the people know I try to restore balance into the
This
form.
is
that-
Throwdown.
look,
we don't
I'm
we don't
usually
have
one that
balance. Yeah. We don't have balance on the
Call
Throwdown.
it-
This is what we do.
The rule of two still remains.
Yep, that's how it
Well,
is on
here-
Throwdown, man.
And here's the thing: no, I don't think there's been a generation that one company has put out two systems in the same in
I
a
agree.
single
Yeah,
generation.
again, Nintendo fucked things up.
I guess
Yeah.
the closest thing is Sega, but they were just add-ons. The
But even
32X,
No, the
Sega
32X, yeah, and the Sega CD could not run by themselves. They're
Yeah.
peripheral add-ons.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the closest I think we've seen. But yeah, I can't think of it.
All right. By the way, this is what Manny. Do you have an essay on this?
As to the which is what was the question again? Sorry.
Manny wasn't paying attention.
That's good, mate.
What do you consider the Switch current gen system or not?
No, because of the power thing.
All right, so you're with me. Yeah, power.
Yeah.
All right. So you consider it like PS3 generation, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for. I want to read Riku's answer, by the way. He says, I personally feel that the Nintendo Switch is a 9th generation console. People want to say Nintendo had two 8th generation consoles because the Wii U failed, even though the Wii U's life cycle was a regular amount of time, which is 5 to 6 years. The Switch kicked off the new generation, and it just so happened to be an earlier start. Just because it's currently competing with consoles in a generation behind it doesn't put it in the same generation. If that's the case, then I guess the PS2 and Xbox 360 were in the same generation since they competed until the PS3 came out. Point is, I personally feel it's a 9th generation, and I feel when PS5 and Xbox Series X are the norm and the Switch or Switch Pro is alongside them, I feel everyone that's now saying it's 8th gen will then say, yeah, we were stupid. It's 9th gen. The earliest a successor to the Switch could come out would be 2022, 5 years away from Switch, which would be 2 years into the 9th gen if people consider this year to be the first year of the 9th gen with PS5 coming out. So taking that into consideration, Nintendo's 9th generation console is 2 years later into the gen or 2 years earlier. It's a mess. See, even Riku says it's a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It's a mess. Nintendo
Yeah,
fucked it
unless
up.
you counted it as a handheld.
Yeah, but I'm not going to do that.
Honestly, I think this is something that'll take generations to even solve.
You know,